everybody. Sustainable Minds training using environmental performance to drive product innovation. And today is a very exciting day because we're going to hear a story from Mathieu, who has a story that does exactly that, integrating environmental performance-based information and decisions throughout the product innovation process, and then coming up with tangible product improvements and results for their clients. So this is a fantastic story, and then Mathieu will be guiding us through that. My name is Joep Meyer. I'm the LCA technical expert at Sustainable Minds. My background is in environmental chemistry, and I am a life cycle assessment expert by training. I spent most of my career in helping organizations in getting a handle on measuring environmental performance, but also with standardization efforts within ISO, ASTM, and the US Green Building Council. Now, just a few notes on the webinar. To keep things moving and to avoid confusion, we've muted all your microphones, and they will remain muted throughout the webinar. Now, we do want to make this a conversation, so if you have questions, then please send your questions through the send question to staff in the chat pane during the presentation, and we are capturing all your questions, and we'll try to address them when they come up or afterwards during the Q&A when Mathieu is ready with his story, and we'll follow up as needed after the webinar. Now, and for your information, we are recording this webinar for future availability. Now, to look a little bit at our program today, I'm going to do a short introduction. I'll take care of that, and then we're going to switch over to Mathieu to hear a story and how exciting it is and what tangible results you can get by integrating LCA-based environmental performance measurements in your design process. Now, if time permits, I will show you how you can use Sustainable Minds in different types of projects. We can go through a few more demos, and then, like I said, we can close off with a Q&A. So let's just get started with what we want to be doing at Sustainable Minds. We want to help you and your organization to get a handle on integrating, operationalizing environmental performance measurements into your work, whether that's mainstream product development, whether it's manufacturing. It's about quantifying environmental performance and integrating that into how your team works, into your process, getting to tangible results. Now, in that way, we want to empower you as an organization to operationalize making products and service offerings greener. Now, within Sustainable Minds, we offer software as a service online. It's an LCA-based, lifecycle assessment-based measurement tool, but it's very much integrated and focused on eco-design. And when you combine eco-design strategies with metrics and measurements to see whether they're really green, you can get to truly greener products. And the key of that is, and we'll see it today with Mathieu as well, is that you have to look at multiple stages of the life cycle and integrate multiple eco-design strategies to get to real innovations. Now, we work with a lot of different clients. Here's an overview of our customers. It's not all of them, but it's a very nice list. You see here the manufacturers. I'm sure you can recognize some of the companies that are listed here. Very much working with companies, getting a grip on environmental performance of their manufacturing facility, but also upstream and downstream. Trying to get a handle on the entire life cycle, trying to help them answer questions about sustainability that they're getting in the marketplace, and then adding numbers towards that. We're also working with educational facilities. And you see here a list of universities, basically training the eco-designers of the future. And it's always good to be working with educational facilities. Now, and Mathieu is a part of the group under product consultancies. I work with several companies there that are trying to integrate sustainability into their service offerings and finding a unique place in that market. Now, with that, I'd like to open the floor to Mathieu, and I would like to invite you to introduce yourself and start your story.
Sure.
Mathieu, welcome to be here.
Thanks, Joep. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, my name is Mathieu Terpault. I'm the Director of Design here at Bresslergroup. Bresslergroup is a 40-year-old product development company based out of Philadelphia. And my background is in industrial design. So I started my career as an industrial designer in Europe and then moved to the US, integrated basically a design consultancy then about 15 years ago. I've been really looking at how to integrate really tools to enable efficient environmental design here at Bresslergroup for a long time. I think we've used Sustainable Mind for about 2 or 3 years at this point, and we've been able to use it across the different types of projects, complex and simple projects, and really been able to see the benefit that it can bring to ongoing product development. So one of the things that I was planning on covering today is one particular case study that look at the redesign of a shipping reel. And I'll tell you a little more about it and what you should know about shipping reels and what it is exactly in a few minutes. But before I do that, what I wanted to do is to, and I'm not sure, if I can click to the next slide. I think, okay, it jumped a couple. What I wanted to start with was really talking about how we were able to integrate Sustainable Mind and LCA analysis into our processes. And the one thing I wanted to start with was basically our standard project plans. I think there's a lag time here between basically, what's really critical for us to be able to integrate any kind of new tool, and especially a tool like Sustainable Mind, is really to ensure that it's going to be easy to be adopted, that people are going to be willing to try a new tool, to learn a new tool, and you know the learning curve is always something that you have to contend with. So really, for us to be able to integrate a tool like Sustainable Mind, it needs to be done in a way that's really transparent, easy to do, and really doesn't change really very much the existing process in place. And we've been able to do that in a way that we were able to conduct a series of LCA analysis all throughout concurrently to our standard development process. And we've basically developed over the years a series of steps, which you see here on the screen, really 5 steps that we go through pretty much on most of our projects, which starts with basically the defining and declare, which is equivalent and happening concurrently to some of the research phases that we typically do when you conduct competitive analysis, when you do some user research, when you try to define exactly what is the problem that you're trying to solve. This is really the first step, and I'll walk you through these different steps here conceptually and as a process before we talk about the specifics of that project. As I mentioned, really these steps really happen really transparently to the rest of the process. And it's really important because when we start talking to our clients about looking at the environmental impact of their future design, the one thing that they start to worry about is this going to have an impact on my development schedule? You know, will that delay basically the introduction of my new product? And if that's the case, then it may be a no-starter. So we really need to convince them that basically there will be no impact to the schedule. And that's really what makes the easy integration a critical element of this kind of a tool in terms of integration.
Okay.
And we've been...
Mathieu, can I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead.
And to the audience as well, like I said, if you have a question, just send it in through the questions tab, and we can forward the question to Mathieu while he's talking about the topics that you're asking about. You said you did several LCAs over the last couple of years. Was it transparent how to integrate the LCA from the beginning, or was it actually a learning curve and you ended up with the flowchart that we're seeing here today? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I have to admit that when we started this and we were trying to figure out how to best integrate it, it was a little bit of a trial and error kind of approach. And we ended up doing some of these steps without really telling the client that we were doing them, but we were actually conducting them because we were kind of getting educated on the process. We were trying to understand where it would fit best in the process. So we conducted probably, I would say, 3 or 4 projects that way until we were able to start documenting this in a more formal way. And now we're in a situation where we can basically lay this out, in black and white very clearly when we start talking about the project plan, the different steps of any given project. So yeah, there's a little bit of learning involved, but honestly I would say that it's been pretty quick. I think it was a matter of about a year before we were able to spell this out in detail. So I mean, I was actually very pleased with the fact that we were able to do it that quickly, and I think that talks to how easy the tool is to integrate to the development process.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic to hear. And because when we work with new clients that don't have the experience that you have over the last 3 years, then usually it takes them a little bit of a brain jump when they say, well, but I don't have the data at the beginning, so how do I model it? Or
Right.
at the end, I want to be so precise, and then is the tool still useful?
It's one of the pitfalls.
Yeah, and then we always have to come with the story of, well, how do you do your other design parameters like cost, where you're very rough at the beginning and then become very specific at the end? And how do you layer that in? And then once we lay out that story, then people start to relate to, oh, so this is how I should be using sustainable mines.
I think, and I'll talk to this a little bit during the presentation. It's at the beginning, it's kind of a daunting task. Even coming to the decision, am I going to use sustainable mine or not? Which kind of tool should I be using? I think at the end of the day, people need to, bite the bullet, get it started, and it really, you learn so quickly that in a matter of a few months, I think you get more educated about the issues, and you start really realizing what the potential is. But like anything else, like anything new, is just there's always a little bit of a fear associated with adopting a new tool.
Okay, thanks.
So, so pretty transparent mapping of these different steps throughout our processes. So I talked about define and declare, which typically happens during the research phase. What you see here in this kind of a Gantt chart format is really how the LCS steps map throughout the early stage of the design process, so mostly industrial design effort. But we actually extend this further when we move into engineering and formal product development. There is still a number of these steps that are still happening concurrently. The second step is the benchmark LCA, which is really establishing kind of a reference against which all the new concepts will be compared. That typically also happens during the research phases, so it's even before we start doing any kind of concept ideation or concept generation. The third step is ideation. We call that bigger increments, and the way we call this process here internally is incrementalism. We told bigger increments is really when you start looking at the system and you look at ways to really change the paradigm or change really how the product is being used, and that's really where you can impact the environmental impact of your product most importantly. It's not always possible. We work on so many different types of projects. Sometimes you have so many constraints that you can't really go there, but we definitely always try. The fourth step that follows is really a series of iteration, and that's really when you started identifying a number of concepts, you want to incrementally make them better, always tweak them, try to find new solutions to actually make your initial ideas even better. And the last step is typically what would happen for us during engineering development, and it's really a series of optimization, and that's in parallel with the iterations of the LCA, where you're really always making your product better and better. And I think you'll see that in the case study. You'll see how this becomes reality.
Okay.
Excuse me.
So that sounds like, so we're talking about LCA, but basically you're saying while you're doing these benchmarks and iterations, you're going from bigger increments to smaller increments. You're also integrating material engineering, cost statements, and all the other aspects that you usually take on board, aren't you?
Actually, yes. I mean, what I think differentiates our approach is that I think we've realized early on that the only way to really make this concept of environmental impact reduction palpable to most of our clients is really to ground it in really tangible benefits. And really the tangible benefits to our clients comes down to, you guessed it, cost. And it's really only when we attack the problem from a cost reduction standpoint that we can then pair it with really the environmental impact reduction and really make sense of all of this, because the client doesn't hesitate a second when they know that at the end of the day they're going to be saving money.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's go to the success story then.
All right, so moving on, trying to click to the next slide. Okay, I think that's just kind of a more detail about the define and declare step. I mean, one other thing that's really important and which you need to realize when you start using Sustainable Mine is really the notion of defining exactly what is the unit of service that's rendered to the end user. And one example that we use is that if you're designing a box fan, for example, you know, that has a certain environmental impact but is only going to last for a couple of years. And you compare that box fan to another design which is going to have twice the environmental impact but be able to live for, you know, 4 times that lifespan, maybe 4 or 8 years. Obviously the second design is better, but it's really quantifying and defining that unit of service to the user, which is a bit confusing at the beginning, and you really need to get to do a couple of projects until you can define that very effectively on an ongoing basis on all of your projects. But
yeah,
these,
I think that's a very fair statement. Yeah.
and also another thing is, I think you mentioned that earlier, the idea that when you start, I think there's a tendency of people wanting to go a little too far, to be a little too detail-oriented, and really build a pretty complicated case study where they really look at every single detail on the project and on the product itself. Well, in fact, I think, you know, what's really important is really to be able to step back, look at the product you're about to design, and really focus on the areas that you know you're going to be able to impact. So, for example, if you know that the packaging is going to remain the same between the old design and the new, there's really no need to integrate it, so that you can keep your modeling simple and you can then do all the iteration a lot faster. But I think this comes also with experience, with, you know, having used the tool a little bit for a number of times. Then you start to understand the benefit of, you know, approaching the system really only from the perspective of the elements that you know will be changed.
Okay, so you're saying if you do a couple of projects, you start to feel comfortable using the tool and making these limitations because you know you're going to get back to them at the end anyway, at some point.
Yeah, and it makes, then you go back to the tool and you really use it for, you leverage it for what it's best at, and you really check some simple things, quick things when you're not quite sure, and you can end up using it. We've used it on projects where basically the only parameter we were changing was just the material selection on a specific part, and that could be that focused, but it could be also about more of a bigger system with a lot of different moving parts to it.
Okay.
I think that's what's nice about the system, is that it's flexible. So I'll skip, I'll walk through some of these. The benchmark is, just talk briefly about the benchmark because it's probably one of the most important part of the process, where really what's critical is to set a reference so that you can compare all of your concepts to that reference later on. And what's critical here is really to set your system or to define your system properly, because if you don't do it properly, then there will be a need to kind of go back and reset or set the system again. What you're seeing here is, and this is the kind of arguments we get into with our clients, because we end up showing them basically some results which are shown here for these particular examples of a toaster. These are examples from Sustainable Mine. And you're really looking at you know, the millipoints impact, Ocala millipoints, and often basically there's a need for people to try to understand where the numbers are coming from. And that could become kind of a complicated conversation to try to justify everything. I think what's important to understand is that what Sustainable Mine offers is the ability to compare future concepts against a benchmark, and that's really the ability to do a comparative analysis between concepts. So, you know, the reference, the number that you use as a reference is not so important anymore as much as it is kind of a reference set in stone that becomes basically your benchmark for improvement. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's clear.
No, I think that is clear, and I think it's good to show the audience. If you in the slide that we just saw there, we saw numbers, but you also saw a percentage difference between the two scenarios that were being compared there.
And
And when you're in the early stage design, you know you're making a broad strokes for material choices and process choices, and how you model the unit of service delivered. That's how you have to look at the numbers as well. So it's very much about trend-based differences and percentages, and so you know something is better or it's not, and then you make decisions and make it more detailed.
So the bigger increments, I'll talk quickly so we can get to the case study, but the bigger increments is really where you start doing some, a lot of brainstorming and looking at, changing, can I change a motor, can I change the current consumption on this product, can I change the way people use it so it actually would, would be used some other ways and would not be used as often as it is currently. So this is typically the kind of different concepts that we end up generating as part of this phase. And then we move into documenting some of these ideas that came out of that original ideation. And what you see here is a series of comparative concepts which relate to the project we're going to be reviewing in a minute, quantifying basically the impact of different approaches. At this stage, it's still pretty high level. We're still looking at broad strokes. We're looking at some, a lot of generalization, a lot of approximations. But still, it gives us kind of a nice overview of where we should focus our attention. It tells us this kind of idea is probably going to have a greater impact than this other kind of idea. So in terms of, helping in the decision making, this is really where, the tool here is really helpful in terms of product development. And moving on, talking about optimization, it's usually we end up also using this during the engineering development and production follow-up of our development efforts. And this is where basically we would, excuse me, we would look at a particular part or a particular design, and we would look at optimizing it using less material, using better materials. And so the effort of the LCA becomes a lot more focused. It's a lot more part-based, it's a lot more material-based, but still, because we're talking about some products in certain cases that are manufactured in millions of units, a small impact at that stage could have a huge impact on the environment. So
yeah, and is it then also the case that by focusing on the big impacts from your sustainable mines LCA, that you know which part you want to optimize, and then you know why you're selecting those topics for your finite analysis, and so on and so on?
Yeah,
and what interaction?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Right. This is usually we start, and it's just really, that maps really directly to what the typical design process is. You start broad with a lot of options. You look at the best options, you narrow it down to what the best options are, and then you keep funneling it down and narrowing it down to a single solution that is the most viable option. So to that point, I think Sustainable Mind kind of follows exactly the same process, and that's probably why it's able to map so transparently to existing processes. The one thing I would say, though, about smaller increments and optimization is that we've realized here that, this is kind of a must-have. So this is the kind of thing that we would do on every single project. The bigger increments where you're trying to change people's attitude and ways of doing things is the hardest thing to do. We consider them nice to have, so we go for it, we fight for it, but we understand that if we don't get it, we still have the ability to impact with the smaller increments.
Okay, so basically the bigger increments are more about the system change, and it could be delivered through, in the ultimate case, a completely different product. If you're very creative there, because it's about the service that you want to be delivering.
Sure.
So once you get to the optimization on the smaller increment stage, you're basically locked in a certain solution, and then you're going to try to optimize that solution for the market.
That's correct.
Okay.
So that was kind of in a nutshell, kind of a description of what our process is in general terms. And now I'm switching and talking about this particular case study. So we were hired by this company called Evolution Reels, and what they do is they make reels, wooden reels that you see on the right-hand side. And what these reels are used for is basically coiling and wrapping a lot of copper and wiring so that they can be shipped from the manufacturer that makes the cable and cable assemblies to the people that would end up basically using them and creating cable harnesses and a lot of other products. But at the end of the day, there's a need to transport these cable from the manufacturing site to all the other locations that are going to use them. The wooden reel is really the standard in the industry. This is really the one reel that everybody has been using for decades. And you could argue that the wooden reel is able to be reused and recycled, used many cycles over. But in fact, when we looked at the reality of it, it turns out that basically a wooden reel is usually used twice, best case scenario. It's very often that they actually only used once. They're used for shipping the cable to the final location, and then they're discarded to the landfill, which is a bit of a shame when you think of the trees you have to cut to make those reels and the fact that it could be reused, but it isn't.
Okay, so there's no kind of take-back program or anything in place like you sometimes see with pallets?
Some people do it, but we cannot say that we've seen that as being kind of an industry trend.
Yeah.
I think it's more of an isolated occasion if a company is actually doing this.
Yeah.
The project we did for this company, Evolution Reels, basically ended up being kind of changing the way they were approaching the design of the reel. And I'll show you some of the things that they're currently doing or considering doing to be implementing some take-back programs, but also some reusing and recycling. And I think we're going at it in kind of the best way, where they're really considering cradle to cradle and a closed-loop recycling on a number of the plastic parts that are involved. So I'll talk some more about this as we get there. But I think and you see here some examples of furniture, and some people actually do reuse this and recycle it. That would be nice if all of these reels ended up being recycled, but it's not the case. Most of them end up in the landfill. I think the main issue is that if you're a company making cable, you're buying those reels from reel manufacturers and you end up basically discarding them very quickly. It's a cost to you, and there's a potential there. There's an opportunity to basically design something that would enable some of the wire manufacturers to basically better control their cost and be able to reuse those reels on an ongoing basis in kind of a closed-loop program where they would take them back and basically reduce their operational costs. So there's a huge incentive in considering something that would be a little longer lasting.
Yeah.
So talking about the project, what we're showing here is kind of the first step where we're looking at the system. And here we start with, and that's what was interesting with this project, is that we started with a series of preconception. So this is showing you kind of the early stage. What we're doing is in Sustainable Mind, we're kind of comparing the legacy item, or what the current product is, which is the single reel you see on the left-hand side. So that's basically a reel that's completely made out of wood, a wooden core and wooden flanges. And our preconception was that basically we could design a plastic version of it that would be collapsible, could be taken apart and basically collapsed in a very small package, that it could be easier to ship it back. We knew that there was the issue of, because we wanted to increase the life of the product, that there was wear and tear on the flanges and that we should consider adding more flanges for the life of the product. Our goal was to go from the average 2 shipment that a wooden reel would see to 36 shipment. This is what we were shooting for. So based on past experience, we made a series of assumptions and started running some models. Make sense so far?
Yeah. So from a cost perspective, was the collapsing of it so that you could basically take more back on one shipment, was that a driving factor to make the take-back program work, or is there no relation there?
That's correct, because you can imagine that it's not like they would ship a reel of cable to a single reel of cable to a single location. It was usually accounts that were set, past history with past accounts, and they would basically be shipping reels back and forth a lot. So they were established accounts, and there was always kind of a shipping back and forth happening. So there was an opportunity there. If you could collapse the reel to be smaller in size, that you could in one trip sent back a lot of the reels that had been used over the past few weeks. So that was the kind of the starting point of the project. What you see here is basically some of the result, and I swear this was not rigged, but what you find here is that the wooden reel on the left-hand side, which really gives you 2 shipments, is 330 millipoints for 2 shipments, which equates to, for 1 unit of 1 shipment, if you will, 170 millipoints for a wooden reel. And when we compare that with our system, which is effectively a set of flanges plus a full plastic reel, we find that the environmental impact is much, much greater, because you see it's about 6,200 millipoints, so about a factor 20 worse than the wooden reel. But the fact that we divided by a greater number of cycles, 36, gives us exactly the same number of millipoints, and I swear it wasn't rigged. Actually, it's actually a little worse. You see that the performance is actually about 5% worse than the original wooden reel. So obviously, you know, when we start this is not an acceptable kind of a starting point. We don't want to do something that's going to necessarily just be the same or just a little worse from an environmental impact. So we looked at ways to kind of improve upon that. So if
it's an interesting case story, because what you see there is that you change the system in both materials, both in volume, and then collapsible, so the take-back program is included there, and overall you see that they balance out. And then that's your starting point, saying, okay, we've created something new. In the end, it's exactly the same, but in real life, it's completely different.
It is, yeah.
And now let's start and see whether we can make the new solution even better. Yeah.
Okay. And actually, I mean, even we're talking about you know, early stage analysis. So, you know, you probably saw, but basically we didn't make the assumption that we could use recycled plastic. We assumed that everything would be virgin plastic, so kind of worst case scenario. Yep. And we started looking at the different phases, you know, where to try to figure out exactly where we can most impact the environmental impact. So in this particular case, the use phase was really neglectable. So we really saw that we could really have the biggest impact on the manufacturing stage. And when you look at what the product is, or at least the initial concept was, it was 47, about 50 pounds worth of virgin resin plastic that was going to the landfill. So obviously there's room to improve there, but it was clearly telling us that that's where we could have the greatest impact. So, you know, as we were conducting some of these early benchmarking and research, we were also conducting some competitive research. And what you see here is a couple of other examples that you could find on the marketplace that you can still find today with kind of the same preconception we had, you know, a full plastic reel that would be able to hold the cable there. Only the one thing that, you know, should have started to worry us a little bit and worried us a little bit at the beginning is that these reel, the big blue one you see on the left-hand side, could only hold about 1,000 pounds worth of cable, when in fact our spec, or the new product we were about to develop, needed to hold about 3,000 pounds of cable, so 3 times that much.
Yeah.
So that was interesting because it kind of helped put the benchmarking in perspective and really help you see basically what other people are doing on the marketplace. So, you know, what the following steps were basically just trying to quantify what the current wooden reel were subjected to, and the kind of load that the reel would be subjected to when it's loaded with 3,000 pounds of wire. And these reels are not, you know, operators with the forklifts basically are not gentle with these reels. They push them around, they bounce them around, they drop them, they drive over cracks. And you can see here a series of measurements that basically enabled us to kind of factor in exactly what should be considered as we design this reel a little further and we start optimizing on it. So moving on to the next slide, I think this is where we start doing some more detail, and we jumped one too many, but we start looking at FEA analysis here, and we start testing our preconceived notion that a full plastic reel will be the solution, and we start seeing some issues with it. What you see here on the left-hand side, the dark blue one, is actually a wooden real, that basically under the 3,000 pound of load is behaving just like you would expect it, almost no deformation.
Yes,
Obviously for, yeah, the one that's full plastic in the center, obviously for dramatic effect, the FEA is always kind of, emphasizing and distorting things more than they would actually do, but it would kind of tell us that there was an issue with the flanges and the structural rigidity of the flanges. Could we have resolved the plastic design so the flanges would be more rigid? Yes, sure. Adding more plastic, more material, more volume could have been one way to go, but we started questioning our assumptions, and we started realizing that maybe the solution was not an all plastic solution. Maybe it was what you see on the right-hand side, which is a wooden core with, no, I'm sorry, a plastic core with wooden flanges, because wood is a fantastic material when it comes to being able to handle these kind of loads. So, so what we thought is, well, what we need to do next is basically run another LCA and run another concept and see when we change our system and change our preconception that everything should be plastic and switch the flanges to be wood and account for the fact that wood is going to wear out faster than the plastic, then we need to look at another system which is going to be more flanges and really look at another model and run another model to see basically if there is any negative impact or positive impact. So we ran the model again, and we basically got a new series of numbers which was telling us that basically we were on the right track. So all of this, I mean, for us it was kind of counterintuitive because we didn't think that it would make sense. I mean, we would be using more flanges, we would be going back to wood, so for us it was a step backward. But if we didn't have the tool in front of us to kind of quantify the difference, we would have gone with our preconception and we would have dismissed this option from the beginning. So I think that's where the tool is really becoming a really very positive impact on the product development process here. So what you see,
I think you're touching on a really good point there, Mathieu. And I think people can appreciate it. We hear so many companies and products and people talking about how green they are and that they want to be green. But the proof in the eating of the pudding, it's about doing the assessment and putting numbers towards either your gut feeling, and that's where you started and you saw an equal performance, and you end up with a solution where you think like, okay, well that's a scenario that I'm not even sure whether we should be modeling this, but let's give it a try. And then you see a surprise result, which is actually really good, and you're combining the best material performances of both to get to a product that's actually performing better.
Yeah,
so it's a fantastic story.
So you see that per reel and per shipment we went from 170 millipoints down to 100, which yield 30% performance improvement. So we felt we were on the right track, not feeling like we were done at all, but at least it was kind of helping us validate that we were following the right path. Yeah. So we continued with doing that's where we start investing a lot more time in design and engineering, because we know we're on the right track. So we start looking at an initial design, and the next step is basically to validate with actual prototyping and testing. So we ended up making full-scale prototypes, CNC machine ABS, and basically putting these series of prototypes, and you see here we had actually I think 2 or 3 different sizes, 24-inch core, 12-inch core. So different types of testing, but really taking all of these prototypes through real-life testing, and that's a really stressful thing. And I know Seth Gelwarwick was managing this project, was a mechanical engineer, was using Sustainable Mind on an ongoing basis too. That was his baby here, being tested by a forklift driver and pushing things around and trying to break things. Yeah. For those of you who have been designing products and have seen their prototypes tested by other people, I think you probably relate to the kind of frustration and anxiety that goes along with doing something like this.
Yeah. Is this what you do together with the client, or is this part of a lab that you have yourself, or how does this work?
It's kind of collaborative effort. I mean, obviously this is a series of very expensive prototypes. We use the client facility and capabilities of coiling the wire, and we're conducting, I think the client was present on site when we were doing the testing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you see your baby coming to life. Is he going to make it, or is there a flaw or something that we need to address? But but these, we're talking about still early stages of engineering development. And I think at this point we know that there's still some safety margin in the design of the parts. We know that they can still stand to be improved. There's still some material that can be chased, and so we go and move on to the smaller increments of the optimization. And we start doing some more finite element analysis and try to basically look at other ways to improve further the design. So what you see on the left-hand side, the blue side, is really the design as it was when it went through alpha prototyping. And then we went and optimized it even further. And what you see on the right-hand side, the red one, is really an optimized version of what we saw on the first prototype, where we managed to chase about 10% of the plastic out.
Oh,
I think a lot of us were being pressured to bring product to the market faster, and in the process, we end up making decisions that basically are going to, we want to be safe because we're going so fast. We don't want to risk anything. So there's a tendency of kind of designing things and over-designing things so that there's a bit of a safety margin that's kind of a comfortable safety margin.
Yeah.
And unless you do that optimization and FEA analysis on an ongoing basis and you get really good at it like we are, you can really do that optimization as quickly as you would need to and be able to chase more material out like we did here on this particular project. But here too, what we did is we basically took this model and basically ran it again with the new numbers. Now we knew we went down from 15 pounds of virgin plastic down to 11.5. Not a big deal, but in the grand scheme of things, when you multiply by the number of reels, number by the production volumes, you're talking about some significant cost savings on resin cost.
Yeah.
And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's really things that you can definitely quantify and that the client will really understand as being a really significant cost saving.
Yeah. I did some quick numbers based on your CO2 factors that you presented for the final design that we're getting at. And you said there's some big cost numbers, and what I did, I compared it to filling up your car, say with 12 gallons of gasoline, and I think everybody can appreciate that. The amount of reels that this company is hoping to be making, if they implement this design, will take almost 150 cars off the road for an entire year, just on the CO2 performance balance indicator there. So this is actual stuff that you can touch. It's not just in cost, it's in environmental performance, and it's stuff that we can actually relate to, and it gets to a significant order of magnitude.
And I think this is why this is, in our mind, such a great success story, because it was a project that was driven by cost and cost reduction, so it was really tangible for the client. It ended up also being a great environmental impact reduction story, and that becomes basically their, what they use basically to sell their product as well. I mean, their end customers and then clients basically see that as a definite benefit. They want to buy it for that competitive advantage that they bring. So it's a win-win story at the end.
So for this client, did they make the decision to integrate this, or did you say, this is how we work, we want to integrate this, and then you basically took them along? Can you tell us a little bit about that dynamic on how to integrate sustainability in LCA?
Oh, we were basically running this as we were making decisions throughout the process. So this is not one of the early projects where we were learning so much. I think at this point things were pretty much well established. So the client was seeing the work that was being done here, and I think that they didn't come to us with the need to develop a more environmental friendly or environmentally better product. It was kind of a result of our effort, and that basically kind of made them more interested in the sustainability story, made them want to do more. And actually, I'll talk about that briefly. There's a number of things that they're doing as a result of this. They're instituting take-back programs. They are actually considering taking the reels that break, if they break, because so far we're 6 months into it, and they're still doing kind of a ongoing testing. But if any of them was to break, basically they've put in place some system where they can take them back, regrind them at the place where they make them, and so the products that would fail would be made into new reels and new cores. So it's really closed loop recycling, which is really what the ideal in terms of recycling. It's the cradle-to-cradle approach. They're doing things of that nature. They're also taking the flanges, the wooden flanges that come back and have been wearing down, and basically they're cutting them down to a smaller diameter for smaller reels. So that's how they end up reusing them. They're really going at it the right way and looking at it from all the angles and really turning this company into a really very environmental responsible company, which was not necessarily the case when they started this project.
Yeah,
so
that's fantastic.
One thing is that, it didn't stop there. I mean, we kept looking at basically using more recycled content and basically doing further optimization, because resin with more recycled content may not have the same physical property as the virgin resin. So really doing other sets of iterations to really make sure that your products still meet all the technical specification that you need. And what you see here is a production device, production reel. It's been introduced about 6 months ago, and now it's really up and running. And basically, you see these reels basically on their way back to the company. You see here a quick illustration that shows basically what it might look like, and you might see that on the flat bed of a truck on the road. And if you see these, then you'll know what it's for. It's basically the reels being collapsed and into a much more compact volume for their shipment back to the cable manufacturer. And this product is called the reduction reel, and it's available in 3 different sizes. So again, as I mentioned, it was a project driven by cost and cost reduction. It ended up being a project that was, really a success story from an environmental standpoint. So it's the kind of project that we hope to be doing more of. And when you think of it, in the shipping reel is not necessarily a very sexy project, but I think when you see the kind of impact that he can have on a project like this, it really turns this kind of mundane kind of a project into a really, really exciting project.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, thank you so much, Mathieu. This was a fantastic story. At Sustainable Minds, we truly believe that if you focus on eco-design and you integrate multiple strategies, and like you've shown, if you integrate the right engineering, that you can reduce cost, and that you can reduce time while you're actually improving the environment, whether that's the overall indicator or the carbon footprint. And we love hearing these stories. So you said you're doing this now basically for every project, and clients are starting to recognize that you're doing this work. Do you see that you get different clients, or are they asking different questions over time? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, we're doing it on an ongoing basis. Depending on really what the project is, we can either do it as a kind of full system approach like this was, or in other cases, and we've shown some examples where we do a kind of a more a simpler project where we do a quick redesign of an existing product where we're going to be using Sustainable Mind, but very much more focused. So it's going to be about specific parts. We use it in one way or another in different ways. I think we've used it enough, and we've now built an expertise at using Sustainable Mind to a point where we have some clients that come to us to conduct specifically sustainable studies. So basically they're in the process of considering the redesign of one of their products, and they want us to basically approach it from a sustainable design standpoint to really drive the decision making throughout the project based on environmental impact. Yeah. So we've had a couple of really good success stories with clients that very, very well-known brands that we can't really talk about their projects because it's been done over the past year or so, and the products have not yet been introduced.
It's okay.
But I'm really excited to see these products coming to life, and they're about to become commercially available, at which point we'll be able to talk about these, and it's really an exciting thing.
Yeah. Okay. And those projects, the clients come to you. They come then with an idea, which could be a preconceived notion of greenness, and then you actually are able to add some science to that, quantify it, and then go through the process that you actually described at the beginning of the presentation, where you go from the big increments to the smaller increments, and then get to tangible results.
Yeah, I mean, before we had Sustainable Mind, I mean, we we always made a point of presenting as part of our concepts, presenting to clients, including one product that would be the smallest product you can make. So configuring the inside and the components in such a way that you would end up with a small product that would end up using less material. So we had this kind of we were thinking about this early on. We didn't have the tools to quantify it, so most of the time the client was not really seeing the value. We could tell them it's going to be better from an environmental standpoint, but because it wasn't quantified, there was no benchmark to compare it against, they couldn't tell whether it was really a great benefit or not. Now that we have the tool, we can make these kind of concepts stand out more, and we stand a better chance of pushing them forward.
Okay. Hey, there's a question that came in from Kenneth, and Kenneth is asking a little bit about the backgrounds of how you modeled this, because we didn't go into the software. And that's what we're not going to be doing today. Kenneth, if you want to see how sustainable mines work, we have weekly webinars where we do actual demo setting of projects, so you see how it works. But Mathieu, his question is transportation and manufacturing, the different processes, part of your assessment? And then can you talk a little bit about how you get to the data that you use for that?
Sure. How we get to the data was mostly a lot of back and forth with the client to try to get them to, for example, for transportation, to understand what their client base was, where their major accounts were located, what kind of distances the trucks would end up traveling to basically deliver the reels. So really understanding what the system was, so that we can put we can quantify some of what the transportation impact would be. And when there was one slide there where you saw basically what the impact of transportation was compared to the manufacturing stage. So we looked at it, but we looked at it in broad strokes early on to really try to figure out exactly where we should focus our attention. I think most of the time we end up pulling that information from our clients. They are probably one of the most knowledgeable resources when it comes to quantifying some of these. I have to admit that in a number of cases you need and you're forced into making a number of assumptions. And assumptions are okay as long as they are reasonable. And when you run some of your assumptions by your clients, usually they can look at it and tell you, yeah, I think you're in the ballpark, or no, I think you're completely off. And I think that's enough to really get your model going and to get good information out of it.
Yeah, and to add to that, having been in the field of LCA for over 15 years, and you should recognize that as well, Mathieu, you don't get just more proficient in using Sustainable Minds LCA in your design process, but you're also getting a better understanding of what and if you can define that, a normal result would be, or what an excessive result is. So you start to learn, look at those numbers, play with them, and get a feel of, hey, maybe we need to go back to this estimate here because it's showing up, and I'm not really sure whether we got the right number there, but it proves to be important. Now let's go back and make it more specific. And
yeah, I mean, one other point I would like to make before we close here is that another hidden benefit of conducting these kind of projects is that you end up learning a lot when you do these comparative analysis, especially when it comes to materials. And you're going to be realizing that a particular material is actually very, very nasty, and that there's always a better solution. And as you go through a couple of these projects, you start learning about this, and it becomes second nature. And I remember Seth, who was driving this project, now is really asking and making some recommendations on the fly that are informed by some of the work that he had been doing with Sustainable Mind, because he knows that a particular material is better than another. So there's kind of education built in the use of the tool that is not something to laugh at. I mean, it's pretty important stuff.
Well, you just made me laugh.
I'm glad.
Because it's exactly the field I work in, exactly my profession, and it's just wonderful to see companies pick that up, and that using Sustainable Minds inspires you to do that. Because this is about process, this is about workflow, this is about getting educated, this is about then learning from that and increasingly using more of those learnings into all your future projects. Because it's never just the one assessment, you always pick up other things.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Mathieu. This was wonderful. We have recorded this webinar, so in some time, and if you have a need, send us a message and we can send you the link to all the videos for everybody in the audience. I'd like to close with a few closing statements on how we you as a company actually deliver services like this. How you start your team and how you get familiar with using the software. I'm not doing more demos. If you want to do more demos and you want to see how this is applied for different projects and for different types of clients, I recommend you go to one of our regular webinars where we really get you started and set up and actually build the first project with you. Here's a quick look at the pricing. Of course, it's software and we want you to use it. There are different packages available. So just look at that and see what you. When we talk about putting you on a fast learning curve, we've all kinds of services arranged around the software. And I just want to quickly touch upon a few of those. And so some of the support is making you proficient in looking at eco-design and going through the process that Mathieu just described. And how does it work for your organization? And once you do the assessment, and you look at results, what do they mean? How can you use them? When is actually a difference, a real difference? And how does it guide you in your process? And we've all on that. And when you use the database, you use, of course, data. And we're constantly working on data development and expanding the database. It's web-based, it's SaaS, so data that we develop becomes available to everybody. So you'll see the database grow over time. We can add public data. If you have questions, we have them available. They're just not uploaded. And they can be available to you quite quickly. But we also help you develop data. So the data collection and the interaction that Mathieu described with his client for the reels. If there's data missing and you want to have actual supply chain data for your suppliers, or you have a manufacturing process that you do and you still see it in a database, you feel a need to model that. We can create custom impact factors for you. And we typically see clients go through projects with us a couple times, and then the database is suited for the type of projects that they're doing. There are companies like here, the Sparta Corporation, very excited. They did a very big project with us. They work as a service technology innovation center for all kinds of plastic manufacturing facilities in the region, and getting them more proficient, integrating new technologies. They made a decision, just like what Mathieu said, to integrate Sustainable Minds LCA in every redesign or product development process that they're doing. And they're doing it just to get started to learn about numbers. What do they mean? What's the carbon footprint? And how do we compare different projects to other projects? So very much a learning stage. And we can only wait and expect to see next year, once they're up that learning curve, what kind of decision they start to be making. If you're worried about public data, you can set up a private version. So we develop proprietary data sets. We do a lot of training. And one of the things we sell the most is a web-based training, but we can also come on site. We can help you set up a benchmark with you. If you're new to Sustainable Minds, that can be very useful. Just check out the website for all the services here. And the one thing we sell the most is the web-based training, where we, with your team, teach you on the fundamentals of eco-design and LCA in a couple hours. It's web delivered, and so you're all together in a room. And then the next day we do a redesign of an actual project you're working on. Because before we do this in the preparation, we set up that benchmark with you. And these are very exciting things, getting to know the project, getting to know for us, and getting to know Sustainable Minds and the software for you guys, and then see where those roads cross. Now, I was very excited to see Mathieu's overview of how to integrate sustainability and Sustainable Minds LCA in the design process as he did. It's almost like normal. Just like you do your engineering and your cost statements. And I would like to finish with congratulating you and your team at Bresslergroup, Mathieu, and how you did that in the last couple of years. You really taught yourself on that learning curve, and that's fantastic to see the results. So
yeah, well,
thank you, Mathieu.
Thank you. We couldn't have done it without you guys putting together this solution, the software solution. So thank you to Sustainable Mind.
Okay. Okay, well then, to close, thank you everybody for your attention. It was wonderful to have you here. We have weekly webcasts. This was a customer story in our customer series stories. We have regular webinars as well, so please check back in with us, and we hope to see you there. And we hope to hear your stories about how you use sustainable mines. Thank you, everybody. You have a great day. Thanks, Mathieu. Bye-bye.
Take care.